What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So, today I wanted to talk about the Orlando Magic because they just committed to a very hard rebuild at the trade deadline last week by trading away Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, and Evan Fournier. I talked about the Vucevic deal already, but I wanted to go kind of in depth on the Magic and what their future looks like because they basically traded away everybody over 25, and they're committing to this full young core. And we're just going to see how this is going to work out for them because they got a couple of picks back. They already have a lot of younger players on the roster, and so it's an interesting future setting up for the Magic. So to jumpstart their rebuild here, they ended up getting back 3 first-round picks in some of those deals that they made on deadline day, as well as a couple of recent first-round picks, players who were still on their rookie contracts that were selected in the first round a couple of years ago in Wendell Carter Jr. and R.J. Hampton, as well as a couple seconds from that Fournier deal. So they got some nice assets in order to kind of jumpstart their rebuild here. They will have like I said, those Bulls picks, which are top 4 protected, Nuggets pick a couple of years from now. And they have all their own picks moving forward too. This year they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league, considering that their record already wasn't great, and they traded away all their good players, and they were dealing with injuries to start the year, and now they're going to be pretty much one of the worst teams in the league the rest of the way. So with some lottery luck, they could potentially have a top 5 pick this draft season here. So they're going to have an opportunity to add a lot of young players to this roster on. Already have a pretty young core, right? They have Markelle Fultz and Jonathan Isaac who are injured right now. But hopefully both of those guys will be able to come back for next season. They also have Mo Bamba, who has been sort of disappointing, Chuma Okeke in there, Cole Anthony, who has been hurt for a little bit this year. Like I said, Hampton and Wendell Carter added into that mix. So they got a lot of young guys on this roster, and it's a pretty interesting group. They've got, none of those players necessarily project to be like a future star type guy. A lot of them are like, okay, maybe a role player or, maybe a borderline all-star type of guy. But none of them are really looking like, okay, this is going to be a franchise cornerstone. So maybe, if they get lucky and end up with the first pick, maybe that's Cade Cunningham or Evan Mobley if they end up with number 2, or even Jalen Suggs if they can get in there. Like pretty much any of the guys at the top of this draft, Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga. There's a lot of very talented prospects that do certainly have some star potential. So if the Magic do continue to tank and continue to suck the rest of the way, they could end up getting their hands on a really, really talented young prospect to add to a young core of players. They have a ton of guys under like 24, 25 who are all, projecting to be at least solid rotation players. So this rebuild might not be as long as you might think, considering just the amount of young talent they already have on the roster. But, we'll just have to see how that goes for them. And then this offseason, I think they're going to lean even heavier into this, considering they have a couple of players who I think they're going to look to move. First of all, Gary Harris, who they ended up getting back in the Aaron Gordon deal. He's under contract for another season, and he doesn't really fit with the timeline here. He'd make more sense on a contender. I know he's a little expensive, but I think there's some teams out there that would be interested in trading for him. So, if there's a deal out there for Gary Harris, maybe get another pick back or another younger player to add to this core, that'd be good. And also Terrence Ross, who has a couple of years left on his deal as well. He's cheap, relatively, right? For the amount of value he provides, I would say he's cheap. About $11-12 million a season. He's one of those 6-man, heat check bench guys who can come in and score a ton of points for you, a microwave scorer, the type I'm talking about. Norman Powell ended up getting a pretty good haul back at the deadline there. You're thinking like Lou Williams, even though he's a little past his prime now. You think about Jamal Crawford back in the day. That's kind of what Terrence Ross is like. He's a guy who's going to come and take a ton of shots and score points for you, right? And that is valuable for a contender. I think there's a lot of teams out there that would be willing to take a look at Terrence Ross, and he's got a couple years left on his deal, so I think the Magic could end up getting something back for him. Was a little surprised they didn't end up trading him, last week along with all their other guys, but they probably just didn't get a deal that they felt was worth it, and there's no rush on that considering, like I said, he has a couple more years on that deal. So Terrence Ross is a guy who I would not be surprised to see moved, but in the meantime, he can, come in and shoot 30 times because they pretty much have nobody else who's going to shoot the ball. So it's going to be Terrence Ross green light for the rest of the season, and that honestly will be very fun to watch because, guys who just have the green light like that to just come in and shoot, it'll be fun. And he's been doing it all season, and he's only going to have a bigger opportunity now. So Terrence Ross is a guy who could be traded. Like I said, Gary Harris is another one. Other than that, It's pretty much just young guys, and then guys who are going to be free agents at the end of the year. They have a couple of veterans who are on expiring contracts or are making really cheap money, who maybe you could flip some of these other guys who are on multi-year contracts. But realistically, you're just looking to bring in younger guys and see what you can find out of the G League potentially, and that's where this team is going to go from here. And then we can talk about the coaching thing as well. A lot of people have raised concerns about whether or not Steve Clifford is going to be the guy to lead the Magic through this rebuild, and I think that's a fair concern, considering that Steve Clifford has a reputation for prioritizing vets over younger guys, and always playing the veteran, the guy who's going to help him win now, rather than devoting developmental minutes to whoever might need them, and whoever might, ownership might be pushing for to get those types of minutes. Specifically, we've seen that with Mo Bamba over the past couple of years, where people have been wanting to see him play, but Clifford has been sort of conservative on the times that he's willing to use Bamba, because he's not really an NBA ready player now. He may never be. He's had a couple of years in the league and has not been great, but at least he deserves a chance to come in and show what he can do, and he just hasn't really been afforded those opportunities. So there are some concerns about whether or not Clifford is going to be willing to play younger guys over whatever veterans might be left on the team. But you could also say, well, maybe ownership is just going to give him a roster full of entirely young guys. I mean, that's almost what he has now. Like I said, there are a couple of veterans left over, but going into next season, I think they're just going to hit that full rebuild. They might end up being one of the younger rosters in the league, them along with like OKC and maybe Detroit. They've got one of the youngest rosters. That's just how rebuilds are. You're going to have guys who are in there younger. So maybe he'll just be forced to play the younger guys, and that's fine. But if he's not going to be there for the rebuild, considering we know Steve Clifford as a very good coach, a very solid coach. He squeezes the most out of his rosters and is able to maximize what he has, but is not always the best at going through a rebuild. He might be more suited for a team that's trying to get into the playoffs, for the next couple of years. So I could potentially see them considering moving on to a different coach if they feel like their rebuild is going to be 3-4 seasons, which it very well might be. So I'm not saying right now or at the end of this season, but maybe middle of next season, who knows, they could figure out some way to end up parting ways with Steve Clifford. I think that would kind of make sense, to maybe bring in a new coach to try to lead this team through the rebuild, and then give them a chance to come out on the other side and see how that fits. So ultimately, my opinion on this Magic rebuild is I really like what they've done here. They took a look at the roster they had and said, okay, the ceiling with this group is to potentially try to be a home court playoff team. Like at their max level, they could maybe get up to 4 or 5 in the Eastern Conference if everybody's healthy, playing together, and all of their guys are developing well and have good chemistry and whatever, right? So that was probably their ceiling, but it wasn't really going to win a championship. And in the Eastern Conference, there's a couple of good teams out there that you're not going to get by. So they looked at that roster and said, hey, we need to find our superstar, and we're too good to really have a shot at the number 1 pick. So it's just time to blow it up and see what we have here with our younger guys, and try to find our superstar in the draft over the next couple of years. And I think this is going to work out for them, assuming some lottery luck here, crossing their fingers for that, right? If they end up landing 1st or 2nd overall pick, they could potentially have a franchise-changing superstar on their hands, and they weren't going to have that if they didn't end up trading some of these guys away. So we'll have to see how this works out for the Magic, but I think this was a necessary change, even if it might bring a lot of losses in the next couple of years. This is the way to maximize this franchise. They just had to hit the reset button. There's a couple teams out there that I think are in sort of a similar scenario as Orlando, where is being stuck in the middle in the NBA is one of the worst places you can be, where you're a little too good to really have a shot at high lottery odds, but you're a little too bad to really be contending for anything meaningful in the playoffs. So the Magic looked at that situation and said, hey, we got to hit the reset button here. And I respect it, because it's a tough decision, especially, for ownership and the front office to make. But ultimately, I think this was the right decision for them and their franchise at the time. But yeah, that's about all I have on the Orlando Magic and their impending rebuild. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to, leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Magic's, all the moves that they made last week. Do you think they got enough value back for all their players that they traded? Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But yeah, like I said, I will see you guys in the next one.